Hello, 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 and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too, because you're watching content like this. The name of this channel, the name of our channel is Holistic Manifesting, because I believe in a whole body, whole mind, and whole being experience when it comes to manifesting these lives that we choose, right? So, what I am discussing today is how contempt happens in relationships, right? And this is not necessarily romantic relationships, but can also be in friendships, because I've seen it happen there. It can be in parent-child relationships, sibling relationships. But this is something that I've noticed is a huge indicator of where that relationship is eventually going to go, right? And there can be an interception. But if people are not focused on the negative energy that's flowing through, sometimes that interception doesn't happen, right? 1 second. This thing looks so big. Ugh. I need something under my feet. There we go. Okay. So number one, what is contempt? It's basically the feeling that people have for others when they feel like someone is beneath them, or an environment is beneath them, or something that they're dealing with is like something that they shouldn't have to be dealing with, right? If you ever hear people say things like, I'm too good for this, or this is beneath me, is a common one. I've said that myself with many things, and there were things that are beneath most people. And sometimes it takes us a while to figure that out, right? Or they look in a way of no empathy, no understanding, and generally just a general dislike for the person's characteristics or their personality, right? And this can be for a number of reasons. The reasons can vary like really widely. It can be because you did them something, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. It can be just because your presence makes them feel a certain way, right? I always think of this a lot when people talk about something like emasculation, and sometimes women are like, well, what am I doing? What did I say? Sometimes you're not doing anything but being a person, and because someone else feels negatively about themselves, they can't control their emotions about who they are and how they feel about themselves when they're in your presence. So you may get blamed for them feeling like them having low self-esteem. And this happens very commonly because nobody wants to be responsible for their own low self-esteem or low self-worth. We want to be able to say this person, that person, it came from out there, because then we don't have to take responsibility for it, right? If we can blame people for it, then we can feel better about ourselves. But we know that's not real. In that holistic manifesting world, I'm just telling you how it goes, but that is not any kind of way that we want to treat our connections and relationships in our environment, right? So contempt is just that, right? Examples of contempt can be like, if I see people together and I see, because I watch a lot of shows where people are being interviewed for like crime shows and things like that, because documentaries, I love to see how human beings interact, hence the sociological background. And so sometimes when I'm looking at couples or people in relationships, it can even be sisters, siblings, whatever. And if they're sitting together and one person begins to talk, look at the expression on the other person's face when they begin to talk or when they begin to speak, right? That's a huge sign of where contempt shows, right? One of the most common signs of contempt that I see is when the other person starts to talk and they go, or something similar, right? It's like just the person speaking gets on your nerves. Just your presence is bothering the heck out of you, right? And I remember I was working with someone a long time ago, and she was talking about this coworker that we had, and she noticed the frustration of interacting with him that everybody was pretty much having. But on my face, it showed a whole lot more. And the reason why is because I wasn't trying to hide my contempt. I was not. And I think sometimes it's really funny when someone is trying to hide their contempt, but they're so annoyed that their face just shows it, right? So you'll start to see that in things. When somebody just brushes off everything you say, they get annoyed just by you having an opinion, you have an idea about something, or you're not okay with something, they just want you to shut up. It's like that's when you really you hold someone in contempt. And generally this can happen in relationships with boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. It can be in husband. I see it the most in marriages, if I'm being honest. It can also happen in sibling connections. It can happen in, mother-daughter, father-son, mother-son. And you'll see it and notice it when it happens, right? And so like, how does something like this start? It starts when we feel like somebody let us down in a particular way. And that letdown wasn't addressed, right? Because this is what I noticed. A lot of people, when they let someone down, because they feel so negative about it, they really just want to gloss over it and keep on moving forward in life, right? One of my daughters used to always say, when she was like 10, 11 years old, every time something went wrong, she would go, pretend, pretend. And I'm like, no, nobody's ever pretending. We don't do that. Like, it was just her mindset. And I asked her that the other day. I'm like, do you remember you used to say pretend, pretend for everything? And she was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like 6 years ago. But I mean, it's one of those things to where when something like that starts, most people pretend like it's not happening, right? So if someone was supposed to come through for something really big for you and you agreed to something because the idea was that they're going to come through for me and this is going to happen and this is what the agreement is, right? And that particular thing did not happen. And we continue on our connections and relationships with it. But that thing, that big elephant in the room was never addressed, right? It's downhill. Because you have to address that stuff head on. You have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge your fault in it. You have to look at the feelings of shame and that you were triggered, and then you can move on. But so many people are used to dealing with emotionally unintelligent people that in environments where they can get away with not being accountable or not acknowledging poor behavior, they try to gloss over it. But sometimes they don't realize they're not dealing with the same kind of people. I've been a person that has shown people, wait, dude, I don't really do that non-accountable stuff. Like, we got to acknowledge what just happened and then we can move forward, right? And so you'll find that people are not used to that. And sometimes it can be jarring for people to have to acknowledge a negative behavior that they had. And one of my biggest things that I do in those interactions, I don't interact with them the same because I want you to know where it started, because I don't want to hold you in contempt. I want to keep on going. And some people say, oh, you can't let it go. It's not about letting it go. If something is not sufficiently addressed, nobody's let it go. You're just the one pretending like it's been let go. You know what I mean? So it's like it's there. And because these things tend to add up over time, they create contempt. And it can go easily. Say you do something and it rubs someone the wrong way. And then the next time you come around, they're still holding on to that other thing. And sometimes contempt happens when you haven't even been given the opportunity to address the behavior. Because some people will have contempt towards you and it's their own secret contempt. They've let these things build up. They haven't had a conversation with you. They haven't addressed anything. They haven't kind of conversation about anything, but they're still over there writing down, yeah, check mark did this to me kind of thing. So sometimes you can be held in contempt with other people and you can't control it in any kind of way. But sometimes we know clearly when that negative energy started and when those moments happen, but we're choosing to ignore it and kind of look the other way, right? Nonetheless, what it eventually leads to, what I find that if someone holds contempt for someone in a connection or relationship, it eventually leads to some type of tower moment or like a negative outburst and an all hell breaking loose type of moment, right? Because people are holding things. When people hold things, eventually it turns into either they can write you off completely because they've been holding this negative energy towards you. So then you're just not even of any consequence. You almost like don't exist, right? And then, or they can go all the way the other way and wait for you to do one other small thing so they can blow up and tell you about all the things that they wanted to tell you about everything before that they never had a chance to address, right? So you just have to keep that in mind. I found myself doing that with somebody. It was such a, it was a terrible, terrible coworker. I've never worked with really bad coworkers because the type of work I do, people have to really love it and enjoy what they do. Rarely you get one of those non-talented people that like to just wedge themselves in between projects and not get anything done, but it does happen, right? And so the contempt I was holding over time was purposeful. And I knew it. I was just like, this person doesn't address their issues. We can't move forward. We can't make these projects work if this person is this way. And then so sometimes you have to get to the place where you completely treat them or treat the situation like it just doesn't exist. And that's essentially what happened. Because if they're not willing to look at it or change it, so this is only an issue primarily when you have to deal with people. If you don't have to deal with someone, then you can literally move about your life and not really worry about, did I rub them the wrong? Are they having an attitude with me or whatever? Sometimes it's just real secretive and you'll start seeing it in passive aggressive behavior and just an overall negative perspective of who you are. And they may start misrepresenting you poorly to other people, right? So you just have to keep in mind, contempt is a very personal experience for people. It's something that's happening deep on the inside. And for whatever reason, that person or you or whoever that situation gives them an ick that they cannot acknowledge, they cannot address, or they cannot move past, right? And so it would take a conversation. It might take some therapy. It might take a little, a little walk in the park or whatever. But if people aren't willing to look at it and acknowledge it for what it is, instead of thinking about, am I being blamed? Am I being put to shame? Am I being, if you can get past that part and we can actually just talk about that issue, then we can have more clarity and we can have a cleaner connection, as opposed to one that's like filled with all of these passive aggressive and contemptual little moments and things. Some people go their whole entire marriages and lives and friendships with these things inside of them. And I've always been too clean for that. I don't fool with people that I don't really care for. That's just my thing. I don't really just think that that's a necessary thing that we have to do in life. If it's something that that they rub you the wrong way, or something that happened that they never addressed, or something that was done wrong to you that you just felt like was never cleanly, addressed, or people held negative energy towards you, and then when you were beneficial to them, they just came to you to be beneficial, but they never really addressed the negative energy that they shot at you for many, many years or whatever like that. Like, I don't fool with them kind of people on any level. That's just not something that I do. For me, you have to address it. You have to acknowledge how you felt. You have to say that you did. And you have to tell me, hey, I ain't like you for that. I thought that was rude. I thought you said this. Because I am, number one, look you in the eye and tell you, my apologies. If it's just that terrible, and I know it came from the core, something I did or whatever, I'm sorry. These things, I didn't mean for them to affect you that way. This is what I was going through at that time, right? But the reason why a lot of people don't bring these things to you is because it's hot air. It's because they're holding you in contempt for something that you are not responsible for. They're holding you in contempt for something that is not even something that should be at your doorstep. It's not even something that should have been laid for you to try to figure out and organize and understand for them, right? One of the biggest ways people do this is making you responsible for their feelings. It's like, man, I wish I could help you with that, but at this time, I'm only responsible for my inner workings and my emotions. I would love to be responsible for yours, but unfortunately, we just don't operate like that, right? And I can say whatever you need to hear today to make you feel good. But if I can make you feel good in that way, then I can make you feel bad in that way too. So what I would prefer is that you would get your own understanding and your own self-esteem and your own belief. So that way I won't be in charge of whether you feel good today and then feel bad tomorrow. Feel good today, then feel bad tomorrow, right? Nonetheless. And so how to address it, that's like the last thing on my little list. You have to just meet it head on. If I am with somebody who won't address a negative thing or something that went on or happened and they think time passing is going to make it go away, I love that. I don't have to be negative towards you, but it's like you can't come back after 3 years and say, oh yeah, how's it going? I'm like, no, I remember why we didn't talk. I'm okay with it, but no. If you were a better person, that would be the first thing that you would be addressing. This is what happened. And you know what? I was just going through a time. We're human. We all do it, right? So how to address it is just being honest. It's getting your ego out the way. It's just acknowledging the fact that we're not always 100% correct in any action that we have. And sometimes people around us do have better insight. Sometimes they do know more about the situation than what we do. And sometimes we do make the wrong decisions. And when those things happen, we have to be willing to say, that was messed up. I don't want that on my conscience. So therefore, I need to come to you and get this thing cleaned, right? Otherwise, stop interacting with people. You held them in contempt. They could feel it. And then what that does is gaslights people. It makes you feel weird because you're like, I know they feel negative towards me, but why do I feel like they're asking me for something or they're wanting me to hang out, but I don't really feel like, that this thing has been solved. Solve it. Then you can have a clean connection, right? Then you can have a clean connection. Then you can hang with people. You can be honest. You can share information back and forth. You don't want to have the kind of connections where you can't even be honest with each other, or you have friendships where you're not being clear, right? Those days are completely over for me. And I will say this, when you become more that way, there's less people that are going to want to fool with you, because the majority of people are walking around with a giant mask on and they're daring you to try to pull it off. Don't ever try to pull off anybody's mask. You don't know what's beneath it. I always say stay away from that, right? But you got to know when people are holding you in contempt, and you got to know when you're holding others in contempt, because that energy is not good for manifesting anything positive in your life. You have to clean that up and then move forward. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day.